Hello, welcome to Interdependent Study, our podcast where we engage in the learning and unlearning work for collective liberation. I'm Damien.
And I'm Aaron. Thank you so much for joining us today. Each week, we'll bring something new to the table and discuss our thoughts and feelings about it through the lenses of who we are and where we can go for a more just society.
We want Interdependent Study to be a space where we're always learning with one another. And Aaron, you're up this week.
Yes.
What have you brought to the table today?
I am bringing a really great article called MLK's Legacy is One of Class Struggle. To fight Trump, we must carry his torch. And it's written by Nicholas Powers. It was published in Truthout a little over a week ago as we record this.
Yep.
It came out, I think, just the day before the inauguration and MLK Day, which has been about a week now. What a week it's been.
What a week it's been.
But this article is a really thoughtful analysis and connection between Dr. King's legacy and the fights that he faced and what we're all facing during this new Trump administration and the Project 2025 blueprint that has been laid out for him by the Heritage Foundation.
Yes.
And I think Nicholas asked some great questions at the beginning of this piece that set the context for me really clearly. He says, quote, "The symbolism of Trump being inaugurated on MLK Jr. Day is chilling. Is King's legacy dead? How can we be observing MLK Day by handing power to a politician who ran a blatantly racist campaign to beat the first black woman to have run as a major party's presidential nominee? Has the goal of transforming the United States from a white ethno-state into a multiracial democracy been vanquished? If so, does that leave us plunging headlong into a permanent Republican oligarchy?" Really, really great questions.
Yes.
That I think all of those questions lead to more questions in my mind as I think through them. But generally, I don't think Dr. King's legacy is dead. I think our goal of a multiracial democracy has not been vanquished yet.
Oh, boy.
I guess it still could be, but I don't think it ever would be.
Yeah.
And if we're heading into a permanent Republican oligarchy, it won't be permanent. It might be long term, I think, but I have hope and I believe that all of that is true. And there's a lot more to discuss in this article, a lot more complication even in my thoughts there. My brief responses to those questions. I think, as I said, I think each of those responses leads to more questions and each of the questions lead to more questions. So, but anyway, that's enough for me in introducing this piece. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm with you. I think one of the most significant feelings that I always get and have when I think about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his legacy, his beliefs, his work, is hope. And so I have that hope. I share that hope. I still do, despite everything, despite, as you say, the week we have lived through that has been the longest week ever.
200 something more to go.
Oh, geez, thanks for that. So I'm with you there with the hope, but I also agree that this was a really insightful, great piece, and especially in terms of just helping to, place some analysis around what we're experiencing right now with Trump as president and all that has happened. And I also highlighted those great questions that Nicholas asked, particularly the questions of, has the goal of transforming the United States from a white ethno-state into a multiracial democracy been vanquished? And if so, does that leave us plunging headlong into a permanent Republican oligarchy? Those questions gave me pause. They stopped me in my tracks. They gave me chills, honestly, because I am a little worried about what is happening and what we're seeing. And especially given all that we've already experienced with the fury of executive orders that have been signed and the ways in which Project 2025 has been brought to life. It is here, it's happening right before our eyes. I mean, there was something that I just saw that was 2/3 of the executive orders are all pulled from Project 2025. It's scary how it has all played out and it is happening. And so, I appreciated his analysis around Trump and what we were seeing so far and the Project 2025 of it all. I'll also say that one of the other things that's related that I really appreciated in this piece was the context of how Project 2025 is just completely philosophically opposed to Dr. King and his beliefs and his work and truly his radical beliefs and work.
Right.
And certainly the ways in which he worked to improve this country and advanced the fight and the path towards collective liberation. And so when I think about that, it's really heartbreaking, right? You know, to see that, to be witnessing that, and to think about what Monday was. Crazy to say that was Monday.
Yeah.
You know, and what Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the holiday, has always meant, to have it be juxtaposed and to have that inauguration happen on that same day. And yeah, it's kind of heartbreaking to think about all of that. But again, all that to say, I appreciated his analysis around it in this piece.
Yeah. And I think, you know, you mentioned the radical King.
Yes.
We read that book on
We sure did.
this here podcast a few years ago now, I think.
Wow.
And so that book is always a good thing to revisit.
Yes.
Because it really puts into perspective the ways that, in the same way that this article does, just in a bigger way.
Right.
The way that Dr. King really was looking to radically transform what this country is and what it has been.
Absolutely.
You know, I mentioned Project 2025 earlier, and Nicholas really gets into just digging into it and lambasting it.
Yes.
And he says, in the context of the inauguration, quote, "They come armed with a plan. Project 2025, a 900-plus page tome of conservative policy crafted by the Heritage Foundation. When you look at it closely, you see more than budget cuts. It is a plan to institutionalize conservatism. It is state-sponsored, widespread suffering." And he is 100% right.
Yes, he is.
This is institutionalizing conservatism. It's the radical vision that really started with Reagan when he started talking about government as a problem rather than contributing to solutions.
Yes.
And there were other conservatives who came before him too who said similar things.
Of course.
He was the big popular guy who won big landslide elections on that platform.
Yep.
But this is what happens when you get a whole bunch of well-funded people in think tanks who are drunk on a slogan from a guy who also had no business being president because he was a B-list actor.
Ooh. Oh.
And I think the kicker at the end of that quote is state-sponsored widespread suffering.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is. It's increasing human suffering in so many ways that we're seeing laid out now as we see ICE raids on more places and getting rid of the sanctuaries that people did have, and even more redefining what gender is, all of those things. And there's a layer of the shock and awe of it all and creating so many different things that it's hard to keep track of that.
Right.
And so I think there is some strategy in not paying attention to everything all the time. And there's also real harm happening in between the shock and awe of it all that is state-sponsored, widespread suffering.
It absolutely is that. And that suffering, that state-sponsored suffering piece is I think you're right, the crux of that statement. And again, gave me pause, gave me chills to think about. And I think you're right, the immediate impact of some of this shock and awe, the fury of these executive orders, the action that's been taken. I mean, some of it obviously is going to be challenged and you know, not implemented, but it's so hurtful to people, and it has a real impact, an immediate impact on people to just be worried. And the sanctuary piece is absolutely just blows my mind. I mean, that we can churches and hospitals, like these schools. I mean, these places that should be sanctuaries and should be places that we keep this out of that. Yeah. There's really no other way to describe it than the state-sponsored suffering and harm.
And one of the things I've seen this week is that so many of us are primed to respond affirmatively to authority.
Right.
Saying no when we have a right to say no is not something that we have practice at collectively in the United States. And I think that we need to work on that collectively. Me personally, I need to work on, and I know that that's something I need to do, but I think collectively we also need to know that no, I don't need to answer your questions. I can be polite and say, no, I don't know anything about any of that.
Absolutely.
See you later. Have a great day.
And we need to all figure that out pretty quickly here, I think, right?
Don't answer questions. Don't do anything. Yeah, all of those things. So
Absolutely.
use your resources, and there's so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking here about Project 2025. Nicholas talks about and really outlines how Project 2025 is this blueprint for tax cuts for the rich and the elimination of essential services for folks in need, and the dismantling of the Department of Education, and an end to combating homelessness in this country, and an attack on DEI and social justice initiatives, and an assault on marginalized people and communities throughout the country. And so when you talk about that state-sanctioned suffering and state-sanctioned and sponsored human suffering, I mean, it's all of those things. They're suffering through all of that. And so he really does a great job in laying out examples of all of those things I just mentioned. And it's just so wild to me that we're experiencing all of this in 2025, how we're witnessing the questioning of the validity of people's lived experiences and people's lives, and we're witnessing the rights of people being questioned and possibly being taken away. It's really upsetting to me to see news stories and to watch the news and to see this happening in America, the quote unquote land of the free. We're just so far from that ideal. Like we're that ideal that we've held so true for so long, the land of the free, if you will. We're so far from that at this point.
Yeah, and we've never really been there in so many ways.
Yeah.
You know, the piece of that question that he asked at the beginning of the article about are we moving away from being a white ethno-state? Right in there is the assertion that we have been a white ethno-state. And it's hard to deny that assertion because I agree with it. I think 100%. This country was founded as a white ethno-state in the way that it subjugated people and colonized land and stole land from indigenous people here. And yeah, I think that all of that is true. And so we've never really been a land of the free. It's been a project of trying to include more people along the way very slowly, and with a lot of backlash and with a lot of violence. And we're now in another state of backlash and violence to some progress that has been made over the last few decades. So anyway, let's talk more about human suffering. Just kidding. The article actually shifts in the last third to talking about how Dr. King's legacy and work can address this moment directly. So Nicholas says, quote, "For King, the Memphis strike wasn't just a class conflict. It was a spiritual struggle to redeem humanity. We are not fully realized until we accept responsibility for the relationships we are in with others. That's why King marched with the sanitation workers." This is the last movement that Dr. King was involved in, and I think was one of the leading reasons why he was assassinated. I think organizers bringing poor people together is an idea that really gets under the skin of the super fragile, wealthy, and powerful oligarchs. This was too much.
Too scary.
For them. And I want to highlight that this strike, it's what he said, what Nicholas says in this is, the strike was a struggle to redeem humanity. Which means when we increase suffering with something like Project 2025 or with whatever fresh hells the Trump administration wants to roll out every day so that we can't keep up with their barrage, when all of that's happening, it's up to the rest of us regular people to oppose them in service to humanity. Our work is to redeem humanity because we recognize the ways that our humanity has been detached from us by the systems and the governments that we have grown up in and been socialized into.
I love that. We're working to redeem humanity. We need to put that on a bumper sticker.
Redeem humanity 2026.
Oh my gosh. Or ASAP.
Or right now.
Really, immediately.
Instead of serenity now, it's redeem humanity now.
Redeem humanity now. No, you're absolutely right. And we've talked about this before, this idea that when there's an onslaught of awful things happening day in and day out, it can be hard to resist the defeating feeling that many of us have. And it can be difficult to figure out, like, how do I, one, take care of myself, take care of the people I love, continue to do the things that I need to do, but also like fight the good fight. But that's what we have to do. We have to fight the good fight. We have to redeem humanity, as you say, that we have no other choice. And so, I appreciated the connection to King and his work, and particularly the the last bit of work that he was able to do. That's another reason why this piece is incredible. One of the other things that Nicholas says that I found really inspiring in that last third of the piece is this. He said, quote, "We can learn from King how to maneuver from a position of weakness. The civil rights movement faced hostile officials that used violence to suppress protests. We face similar threats under Trump and the Republican trifecta. King faced a hostile public raised on anti-Black racism. We likewise now face a public turned against wokeness. King faced interlocking laws from legal segregation, redlining, and a racist criminal legal system. We faced Project 2025, which seeks to recreate, to a degree, the state-sanctioned discrimination that our ancestors fought to end." And so when I read this, like, it doesn't lessen how awful what we're going through is, but the reminder that we've been here before is really helpful in a way. It's really powerful. And so in the same way that I think Project 2025 is a blueprint for them, this history and the lessons that we learn from it, especially from someone like Dr. King, is our blueprint. And that, I think, going back to where we started, gives me hope. It gives me hope. It gives me a drive to figure out, okay, we've been here before. My ancestors have done this before. We can do this too. And we can get through this. And we can redeem humanity, as you say.
Yeah, I hope.
I hope.
I mean, I think, and that's what I think holding on to hope is that you still believe that there's something that is left to redeem.
Yes.
Like that's one of the versions of hope that I hold on to.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, well, let's talk about application. Okay. How does this article apply to our day-to-day lives and work for the redemption of humanity?
Yes.
And collective liberation? My application is connected to that last piece that I was talking about. So Nicholas says, quote, "We must now pick up the baton from the radical king of 1968. His legacy pulls the rug from under even the most powerful and violent regimes. King's political adherents used his tactic of contrasting widely accepted values in sociology known as consensus values to less accepted ones. The goal is to make clear that most Americans already were progressive. And there's so many ways that Americans are progressive in what they want to see. We talked about that a few weeks ago in the discussion between King and Yamada Taylor and Daniel Denvir, when they said that if our progressive policies were up across the country on ballot initiatives, they would most likely pass across the country. And so I think we need more people speaking more clearly about what our values are and how disconnected they are from our reality.
Yes.
Because I think that break from what we all want and what we all need and our lived experiences leads us to different choices than Project 2025, especially when we see that most of the things and the promises of a Project 2025 aren't going to come to fruition. Like none of this that Trump said on the campaign trail or any of that the things for actual people, none of that's going to come to fruition. Grocery prices aren't going to come down because of anything that he does.
Right.
And so when we realize it's all snake oil and is disconnected from the things that we actually want, which is slowing inflation and all of those other things that actually impact, our bank accounts and
our day-to-day lives. Yeah,
we see that disconnection from our reality and from what we're being sold is huge. And on top of that, I think we need a value shift in many ways. We need to be more concerned about what's happening with our neighbors, or what's happening to people we don't know than we are all collectively.
Yes,
I think we need to sort of generally care more about people who we recognize as being on the margins of society.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that concept or that thought about understanding our neighbors and their needs and who we are and our shared struggles. And in so many ways, it's that shock and awe, as you mentioned earlier, about what Project 2025 is and how it's really honestly fueled by hate. And the actions that they're taking right now are all fueled by hate and certainly reversing all the things that, Biden did and all of that nonsense. But none of it is directly in service of people and what people really need in this moment. Absolutely. I love that. I think my application is related to yours. Mine comes from something that Nicholas said in this piece about opposing visions. And I just really appreciated the succinct way in which he put this. He said, quote, "Trump's inauguration on MLK Day highlights the clash of two opposing visions. MAGA wants to rebuild walls of racism, patriarchy, and classism, even ending birthright citizenship. The left has fought to enlarge the circle of citizenship and include people of color, women, workers, and LGBTQ folks. But the right has the White House, Senate, House, and Supreme Court. And I mean, we certainly know, as you mentioned, we've talked about this before. We've talked about the ways in which the left has failed, has fumbled plays, has made decisions and done things that have opened the doors for the right to step into power at all levels of our government. But I think when you lay it out like Nicholas did here, this idea of opposing visions, it's clear to me which vision is on the right side of history. It's clear where I want to be. It's clear to me just how dangerous of a time we're living in and through right now, particularly with this administration and with Project 2025 guiding their work. It's clear to me just how important it is that we fight against them with everything we've got, and in all of the ways that you mentioned and we talked about, understanding who we are and who our loved ones are and who our neighbors are, and stepping into that fight and doing that work together. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think as you talk about how we fight against them with everything we got, I think if we look to history, the opposition to authoritarianism and to fascism has frequently been fought and won, not necessarily by liberals who are operating within systems, but by people who are operating outside of the socialists and other folks who are have a more radical vision similar to Dr. King.
Absolutely. Good point.
All right, let's talk about homework.
Okay.
How do we want to continue our learning and unlearning beyond our conversation today? I mentioned a few times that this is written by Nicholas Powers, and there's a little bio at the bottom of the article that mentions some of the other things he's written.
Yeah.
As you might expect.
It typically happens, yes.
Yeah. But it says that he wrote a political vampire novel called Thirst.
Yes.
And now I want to read that.
Okay.
Because I'm super curious about what a political vampire novel could be.
Yeah.
And so that's a silly piece of homework that I'm taking forward. And I don't know that it helps me with my learning and unlearning work. But finding little moments of silliness or humor or joy is, I think, a small form of resistance to the fresh hells that we are facing every day.
Fresh hells. I love that. I think we've all got to do things that bring us joy in the midst of everything that's happening, in the midst of the fresh hells, as you mentioned. Yep. So that's great. I also did a little digging into Nicholas Powers, and he's written a bunch of pieces for Truthout. Looks like he's written, dozens of op-ed pieces for them. So I'd love to check some of them out to see what more I can learn from him, because I really appreciated this piece and got a lot out of it. The other thought I had for homework, and we can certainly talk about this more offline, but there's a part of me that feels like I should actually read Project 2025. I've never been able to bring myself to do it. Partly, it's 900 pages, as you said earlier. And also, a long time ago when I first heard about it, I didn't think we'd be at a place where Trump would be back and we'd be in the fresh hells of it. So I just had this thought that, would it be helpful to read it and see maybe what's coming and just to see what they're thinking and trying to do. But I don't know. I don't know if I can even bring myself to do that. So we'll see. That's just a thought I had.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I believe there has to be some people who have done that work for us.
Yes.
And we can trust them and the work that they did to summarize.
Yeah, like where's an executive summary of it somewhere? Yeah,
because I did download it when I first heard about it.
Yes,
and so
I think you shared it with me, and I was like, I can't read this. I can't do it.
Yeah, because it was early in the cycle.
Yes,
and I was like, I skimmed it and couldn't get. I was like, I can spend my time on more productive things.
Yes,
I still probably believe that to be true.
Yeah,
but I think it would be helpful to maybe know a little bit more about
key points and
what are they doing?
Yeah,
and then maybe we can write Project 2029.
Yeah, how about that?
Yeah,
right here on this podcast. It starts here. Take that, Heritage Foundation.
Yeah,
I love it.
All right, well, that's it for our conversation today. And Damien, you're up next time. It's your turn to bring something to the table. So what are you bringing?
I'm bringing a piece from In These Times for us to talk about next week. And when I found it, I felt very timely, much like this piece. So I figured we should just go ahead and check it out. The piece is called Our Fight Doesn't End at Ceasefire. And it was written by Nashwa Bawab, who we've had on the podcast before. And so that also made me want to bring this piece to the table. This piece is actually part of a conversation that took place back in October. It was part of a panel conversation that Nashwa had with several pro-Palestinian organizers about the future of the struggle and how important it is to disrupt the distribution of U.S. weapons and support to Israel. And so while this piece is new, the conversation feature in it is obviously a couple of months old now, but I still think there's probably a lot we can learn from these organizers and their conversation. And especially now that the ceasefire has happened, I think there's a lot we could talk about there and explore. So I'm excited to do that with you next week.
Yeah, I almost brought this week.
Oh, look at that.
I found it just before I found this piece and shifted because I thought we were recording right before the inauguration and MLK Day. And I thought, well, this seems super timely. But it's also timely because the ceasefire is happening or it has started.
Yeah.
And it seems like the conflict has shifted to the West Bank.
Yes.
And so while there is a ceasefire in place, maybe for Gaza, it's not true for all of Palestine.
Yeah.
And that's just another element. And so, yeah, that's a reality of the situation too. And another reason why I think disrupting the distribution of our weapons and support to Israel is really important long term.
Really important.
And it won't happen under this administration.
Probably not. But, well, yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah. Wait, I'm looking forward to learning more from people who are thinking about it and have been thinking about it and working for that for a long time.
Absolutely. I love that. Let's do it.
All right. Well, with that, we want to thank you for joining us today. You know what we're going to ask you to do here, but in case you forgot, please follow, leave a rating and review, share our podcast with the people in your life. Follow us on social media, including Instagram and TikTok. Check us out on YouTube. Sign up and join us on Patreon to get notified about any new things we've got going on behind the scenes.
Yes, thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's not about us, but it is about all of us. We'll talk to you next week.